Dominique Samuels is here. And Dominique, you are very outspoken on the immigration issue. And it's always interesting to me then to read the fellas who reply to you, because on both, neither the left nor the establishment right seems keen to talk about this issue.
Yeah, I completely agree. Firstly, thanks for having me on your show. But whenever I do speak about these issues, the issue of immigration, and for me, you know, the illegal invasion that's currently going on is just one part of a really concerning story that's happening all over Europe. There's also the issue of legal immigration as well. But whenever I do say any of these things, I'm attacked and told that, you know, you're an immigrant, so why are you saying these things? You know, you're not white, you don't look British, you and your family need to go back to wherever you came from. And look, at the end of the day, I'm not an immigrant, my parents weren't immigrants, I'm mixed race, I'm British, I was born here, and regardless, even if I was an immigrant, there are millions of, you know, British ethnic minorities and people of mixed heritage that don't want open borders, because what do you see? We've seen the result of open borders, not just in Britain, but in the rest of Europe. You get cultural decay, you get the issue of gang rapes of young children, you get to the point where there's sort of no communal ties that we have in this country anymore, because they have been eroded by mass migration. And you don't have to be some far-right racist to recognise that reality. I've lived in areas where I've seen the demographic change. You know, it's been really radical, and there are certain parts of this country that are completely unrecognisable. And I think, you know, people should be able to tell the truth about that.
No, and and the racism, if anything, is from these people who say, well, just because you have black, brown, yellow skin, because your grandparents came from the British West Indies or British West Africa, you should be in favour of absolute open borders and anybody just walking into the country. If that isn't racial condescension, I don't know what is.
It is, because it's basically saying that we're literally all the same. It doesn't matter what shade you are, it doesn't matter what country you come from, it doesn't matter the culture, it doesn't matter the cultural ties between Jamaica and the UK, which is why people from the West Indies were asked to come here, which is why my granddad came here when he was 9 years old, legally invited. That's a very big difference. And they assume that we're literally all the same. I have nothing in common with someone coming over in a dinghy from North Africa, and it's not racist to make that assertion. It's simply reality. And if you want to play the race card, which I'm very, very happy to do, I could easily say that large swathes of people from the Middle East and North Africa have extremely racist and archaic views towards black people. So I could say I don't want them here because they are pretty racist. A lot of racism I've actually received have been from people from these backgrounds. I could easily pull that card.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. You can spend 20 minutes in Libya or Saudi Arabia or the Palestinian territories, and the things you'll hear about black people are really quite astonishing. What prompted my thoughts on this was this terrible murder of this poor 12-year-old girl in Paris that you tweeted about. And I saw just before I came on air from Senator Stéphane Ravier, who represents Les Bouches-du-Rhône, which I think is down around Marseille and just north of there in the French National Assembly. And he says very powerfully, let me see if I can translate this, our youth are being massacred our youth are being massacred while professional mourners chase an imaginary Islamophobia. And then he criticised Monsieur Macron, the French president, for saying pas un mot pour Lola, not a word about Lola. There's something weird, isn't there, when these terrible things happen to the most vulnerable members of French society or British society, and the whole attitude of the establishment is just to pretend there's no bigger picture to see here.
Because it's very, very easy to ignore, because we can all see what the problem is. And it's the issue of asylum seekers, of migrants from these countries coming over here and committing crimes. And look, this is not to say that migrants are the only ones that commit every single crime. You know, of course, there are people that commit depraved crimes that are native to Britain, that are native to France. But my point would be, why would you willingly import more of a possible problem when you know there are people already in your country that are committing these sorts of depraved crimes? Surely you'd want to deal with the people already in your country before inviting people over that have vastly different attitudes towards women, vastly different attitudes towards sexual consent, and just vastly different attitudes culturally in general. Why would you want to import more of that problem, knowing that you open up children and women to that risk? And, you know, let's not pretend that an influx of migration in Europe hasn't been associated with higher levels of rape and sexual assault. We saw it in Germany. We saw it in Sweden. We've seen people being beheaded for insulting the Prophet Muhammad in France. Let's stop pretending this isn't a problem, because it does exist. And the grooming gangs in the UK as well.
Now you make a simple but devastating point there that I've never heard anybody come back on, which is that every society, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the UK or France or Tajikistan or wherever, has its share of murderers and rapists and other criminals. So there is absolutely no point. That's bad enough. There's no point then to importing more of them. And yet we have I mean, it's simple, but nobody has an answer to that. And at a time when everybody has to jump through hoops just to live ordinary life, why then, at a time of pandemic, do we let people just walk into the country on the southern shore?
And not even just, you know, walking into the country. They're essentially, you know, being welcomed in, being given hotel rooms, being given free food, free NHS, the lot. Meanwhile, Brits are set to starve in the UK. I mean, 5 million a day minimum that we're actually spending on this problem, whilst we're expected to make constant sacrifices in this country. And, you know, let's also stop pretending that all of the people coming in here are budding doctors and lawyers. They're not. The likelihood is these will be people that take up low-skilled jobs. Now, there's a skills crisis in this country. There are plenty of British people born here, that's nothing to do with skin colour, even if you're not born here, British citizens that can do those jobs. So I honestly don't understand the point of this. It's basically an invasion in the name of what? In the name of open borders, something we're supposed to be against, at least the Conservative Party is.
Yeah, do you know why the Conservatives just don't drive a stake through this thing? It's arisen on their watch. Why don't they deal with it?
I think they're scared. I mean, we saw what happened when, you know, Liz Truss, I think she's a disaster, but we saw what happened when Liz Truss tried to push against the orthodoxy. If we left any sort of convention, we'd be under attack globally. You know, even Joe Biden's been piping up about Liz Truss's economic policies. Imagine if we left European conventions of human rights, there'd be absolute uproar. And I just don't think the Tories are prepared to fight that fight. They're just not. And as a result, they will lose the next election, period.
Golly, Dominique, it's almost like this whole democracy thing is just a sham. It's a dangerously bad lesson to teach the electorate